All of you. Hold on. Good evening, all the friends. I'm again here with another class on English. Today, as we discussed yesterday, the importance of English language and how can you broaden your horizons and how can you cultivate an atmosphere which will facilitate a certain degree of fluency in it. Because if you really want to learn something, I would recommend you, or anybody would recommend you, to learn it to the absolute hilt. Learning anything half heartedly will have more adverse effects than the positives. Therefore, let's try and learn English wholeheartedly. Let's harness it to the absolute hilt, as I've just suggested. Yesterday, we talked about the atmosphere, how it is incredibly important in nursing a language, especially when it's a foreign language. And we also talked about the means that could provide for a replica of the environment, which otherwise we may not have because the culture that we are surrounded with in India is one that doesn't really allow a language which is a foreign language to flow in a smooth way, because Hindi is our language and we have a lot of languages in India. Regional languages are the predominant language, or the languages which are predominantly employed by people in India. I'm sure at least 70 to 80% of people speak in their regional language and not even Hindi. Therefore, in such an environment, which is a whirlpool of languages, a smooth flow of a foreign language becomes all the more difficult. But as I've suggested, as we discussed yesterday, that the same wouldn't have been possible 15 years ago, 20 years ago. But now it is possible because today we have this great blessing at our disposal, which is technology, and at the pace the technology is growing. So we can use the technology and get better, because as I've always said, as I've said in many of our classes, it is at the subconscious level where you learn a language, not in your conscious uh, life while you're walking around. So if you're consuming everything in English, be it the videos that you watch or the articles that you read via your phone, it will slowly, the process is a slow burn, as I've said yesterday, but gradually it will seep in your subconscious. And once that happens, then everything falls into place. Then you become a fluent speaker, you hit the right note, you hit the right words at the time that they are needed. So there will be this smooth transition. So today, let's go ahead. Now, let us take into account, or let us try and study the language on a meticulous level. Let us have a prismatic gaze at it. Methods for improving English. Now, the first one that we have at our disposal is not what we need to have or what we need to add to our repertoire, but quite the contradictory. It is what we need to eschew. You must have heard of it multiple times. It's about, it may not be about the things that you need to employ. It is also about the things that you need to refrain from. And sometimes the latter could contribute in the equal measure as the former. Therefore, today we are going to understand, or perhaps understand, why eradication is important. Why do we need to refrain from using certain words, idioms, phrases that we happen to use only to elevate our language? a certain set of words needs a critical assessment. This line very aptly puts forth the wound, the issue, the affliction that we have right under our nose. We'll have to assess ourselves and figure out what are the words that we are using which are extremely repetitive and may not possess that wow factor, the X factor that we so often speak of. If there is a set of words that we employ and they lack that X factor, they lack that charm to beguile your speaker, then don't you feel it is better that we are better off them? When the candidate is trying to uplift their level of competence in the English language. Following the above paragraph, we need to identify those words, minimize their usage, and find suitable alternatives. If you have confronted this feeling and you are currently undergoing a sense of trepidation as a result of which, wherein you're feeling that your sentences do not carry the kind of flair, the kind of charm and elegance which is needed to charm your listener or to have him in the palm of your hands. If you're not able to bottle people with your oracy skills or with your oratory, could it have something to do with the words that you're using or the words which you're resorting to? Is there any potential of change? Once you make that conclusion and you arrive at that conclusion that maybe there are a few things wrong, or maybe not wrong, but not adding up when it comes to the words that you're using. Those words are extremely repetitive. They lack that wow factor. There is nothing extra celestial about them. There's nothing stylish about them. There's nothing elegant about them. And your listeners aren't exactly gregarious when it comes to listening you. And once you have arrived at that conclusion, I would say half the battle is won. Now, you need to start stage number 2, which is identify those words. We'll get into great detail as the class continues, minimize their usage, and find suitable alternatives. So this is basically a cursory glance into what today's lecture is going to be about. The first stage that we need to clear after reaching a conclusion that we definitely are frequently employing a certain set of words which lack that exorbitant charm, that ability to enthrall people, the assessment begins, the diagnosis begins, and you start finding, or you become conscious of the fact that there is a set of words which you frequently use, which are not providing a meaningful contribution to your overall communication, which are not serving the purpose. Now, what are those words? And after you have identified those words, we move further. Then, once the diagnosis is done, we have thoroughly, consciously, comprehensively studied our own selves from the prismatic gaze of self-introspection, and we have scooped a set of words which we are frequently using and the words which aren't extremely meaningful. Now the stage number 2 is minimizing their usage. We have to be conscious of those words and we have to try and suppress using them, or we have to minimize them. Every time in the heat of the moment or in the spur of the moment, because it is a part of your subconscious, you happen to poo those words out, you have to tell yourself and you have to put your foot down. Wait a minute, this is the word that I'm not supposed to use. When you keep on warning yourself repeatedly, your subconscious brain will start intercepting it. And then naturally, there will come a point in time where you will reach a complete obliteration of those words, wherein your system would have obliterated completely those words off your system. Complete extirpation. That is going to take time though, but you have to start doing it. Now, once you have done that and you have begun to minimize the employment of those words, then there will be a void, of course. What else? How will you finish your sentences? Then you start finding suitable alternatives. Whatever the word is that you feel that you are repeatedly using and lacks that charm, and you stop using that word, then the next stage is to find an alternative which has all the ingredients which those words were bereft of. Now let's get deep into it. Here comes identification. Identification of the same isn't much of a task, one would make easy work of it. The words that need immediate assessment or eradication are the ones that could be understood by people not as educated as you or people with a modest and humble educational background. So, how would you identify? Now, if you focus here, by people not as educated as you, if you have had the good fortune of pursuing conventional education, in other words, high level of education or elite education, then don't you think it comes within with a responsibility, with a set of responsibilities and onus and incumbent upon you? Sometimes this onus, the set of responsibilities, they could be daunting, right? If you have had the good fortune of pursuing an education which is high quality, high caliber, elite, fancy, whatever, then don't you feel that it needs to reflect in your communication? Think of this. Pick up your brains, ring your bells. Don't you feel that you are nursing this responsibility, or you have this responsibility, wherein because you have pursued a conventional education, in other words, you are highly educated, that has to show in your communication. Let me make it even more simpler. If you are working at a highly coveted designation, a designation that every second person in your known vicinity would kill to have, or would chop a leg to have, then don't you feel that the person at such a highly coveted designation has to have a language which is all silk, all smooth, all glamorous, all stylish, and it should have an aspect, an element which is missing in mere mortals. By mere mortals, I mean people who aren't working at the designation which Mr. X is working at or you are working at. If the watchman of that building or an accountant of the building happens to employ the same set of words as the Mr. X who's working at an elite designation in that building, then where is that distinction? That distinction which we associate with somebody who is highly educated. I do not by any stretch of imagination mean to ignite a sense of glib inside of anybody, nor am I looking or I'm looking down or frowning upon the jobs, the modest jobs. But I'm just using it as an example to further strengthen my case. Not digressing from the topic, but I was just making my stance clear. Where is that distinction? If you're highly educated, it needs to show in your language. Therefore, when you're surrounded by people and the words which are used or espoused by people who have had modest education or humble education, then those words are the words that you need to refrain from. Are you understanding it? The words which are employed by anybody and everyone that you know. And those people are those people who haven't had the good fortune of pursuing the kind of education that you have pursued. Then you can simply eradicate the words they are using off your dictionary. The identification process is that simple. It isn't convoluted or multi-layered. It is extremely simple. The words which they seem to be using are the words that you need to stop using. Now, we come at the stage number 2. Or stage number 3. Let's start finding the alternatives of those words which have become commonplace, repetitive, cliche, and passé. Considering the kind of education you have pursued or are pursuing, there is a responsibility on you to sound elite, to sound distinct. Let's find alternatives of some words which have become extraordinarily commonplace. Let's take good. Nobody is a stranger to this word. No one is a stranger to this word. A person who runs a laundry, a person who runs a midday meal, a person who rides a rickshaw, a person who drives a bus, a person who's guarding a bungalow is, or all of them, are acquainted with this word. But now the catch here is, they have not had the good fortune of being as highly educated as you are. Still, they are able to use this word. And you happen to be using the same word. Now that is almost criminal. It is almost a sin. It could be held, or it could be held tantamount to a sin or being criminal because you are educated. Where is the difference? Let's try and find alternatives for this. And let's refrain from using this word. Now, good is one such word that we employ to the hilt. The issue at our disposal with good is its commonplace attributes and properties, which we are all well versed with. People who are not even educated can use these words, therefore, frequent employment of it will minimize the scope for distinction. And here we are bidding for distinction, but we have dropped the axe on our own feet by using these words which are used by everybody under the sun. Don't you feel it's criminal? Because you have those fancy degrees. What are they there for? Are they there for just mere pomp and show? For that grandeur? Or you want to make some use of it? Or you want to mirror the importance of those degrees? If you want to mirror that, then you stop using this. Let's try and find alternatives for good. So quality is one suitable alternative that we have arrived at. Now, you would be highly mistaken if you feel that good and quality are interchangeable. It isn't so. But it can up the ante of your sentence when you are using this in place of good. Do not conflate the properties of these two words. Again, you'll drop the axe on your feet if you do so. They are by no means interchangeables. They both have their own set of meanings, their own set of properties. But if you interchange this word with good, then it will boost your sentence or up the ante. Now, how would you use it? We are going to learn that. It's quite a poor quality of workmanship. There's been a decline in water quality. The mirror-like quality of standing water may have had symbolic implications too. Immediate measures of quality of healthcare remained unchanged or improved slightly. These colleges provide a better quality of education. Now, we've heard of these sentences, and I'm sure you come across these sentences frequently. You do every day. Let's say I have this ball in my hand, which is a golf ball. If I feel that it is good, or it is good looking, or I like the looks of it, then, and if I happen to be pursuing a fancy education or an education of the top echelon, then there's, of course, as I've already stated multiple times in the course of last half an hour, whatever, that it becomes a responsibility, or it is a responsibility on my shoulders to project that distinction, to mirror my degrees. And if I use the word good, that this particular ball is good looking, and people who are working in the building at humble designations or posts are also able to craft the same sentence, then where is that distinction? Let me try and change the word. Let me not resort to good. It cannot be my final refuge. I can use the word quality, and I repeat it again that the two words aren't interchangeable. They have their own specific set of properties, functions, meanings, and the way they are used. But still, I can use the word quality. This ball has quality looks. This smartboard right behind me is high quality. What else? Japan manufactures high quality products, especially tech. Lucknow, when we talk about an old school feel, a city with traditions, a city which is shrouded in traditions, and every ounce of the city reflects that. Then Lucknow has that high quality old school feel. Now, what this does, this diminutive replacement, small replacement, What is it doing? Are you able to decipher the difference that it is making? I'm sure your listener would be able to do so. He'll definitely observe, he'll definitely notice that you have crafted a sentence in a very unique fashion or in a more stylized fashion, which is rare. Now, that exotic element of this sentence gives it that glamour, that bit of sass, in other words. It gives it the X factor. Just one minute replacement, and the complexion of the sentence has diametrically changed. The sentence, which was commonplace, typical, cliche, passe, repetitive, suddenly becomes interesting. And what do you achieve by it? You achieve the ear of your listener. And isn't that the primary purpose of communication? To have our listener and have his infinite attention. That is what a speaker asks for. Any speaker in the world, you ask them what is their primary purpose. Is their primary purpose to convey what they are trying to say? I would beg to differ if they would say what they want is infinite attention of their listeners. That is why you speak. And when you are at a top tier designation in your company, when you have the responsibility of sounding a little distinct, and when you also use words which aren't used or espoused or employed by the workers working in your company, you attain that distinction. You attain that quality distinction. Therefore, do not use the word good. Try to use the word quality. Or perhaps, why don't you Google it? Why don't you find a plethora? There will be plethora of synonyms available for good on Google. Any 3-4 of those which pique your interest the most, you start using those. But steer clear from the word good. Let's find out another word, which is a passe, attractive. Now everybody knows the word attractive, everybody is well acquainted with it. Where is that magic? If you are using this word in your speech time and again, and as I've said, that this word, I've just said, right, that this word is commonly used. Again by the person who is working at a laundry. Again by the tailor who is stitching your clothes. Again, even by the person who polishes your shoes. And let me repeat it again, that I'm not in any shape or form or in any stretch of imagination trying to frown upon these jobs. In fact, I have infinite respect for the people who do these work. But I'm using them as an example to instill a sense of rather fear. I'm trying to instigate my viewers, because what they've been doing is criminal, is wrong, is almost satanic, and it's almost being an infidel to your discipline, because you've studied so much, you worked so hard, you've toiled under the sun, and you have completed your education, gotten these degrees, but it doesn't reflect in your communication, and that is a major problem. So this word attractive, it also has to be eradicated. And for reasons that we've already discussed, for reasons which good has to be eradicated for the same set of reasons, because it is commonly used. Now, attractive is one such word that we employ to the hilt. The issue at our disposal with attractive is its commonplace attributes and properties. People who are not even educated can use these words. Therefore, frequent employment of it will minimize the scope for distinction. Now, let's try and find an alternative for attractive. Let's find alternative of attractive, which you will use in your sentences whenever you are about to spew out of your mouth the word attractive. You be cautious of it. You take precaution. You suppress that urge. Suppress it to its last layer till it becomes non existent. And when you find that void, that emptiness, you alter it with this word. And that word is intriguing. Now, let me repeat it. Intriguing by no means. Again, these two words are not exactly interchangeable. They have their own set of meanings. Yet, you can. You have the license to use it in place of attractive. Intriguing is something that pulls you, something that triggers that inquisitive urge inside of you to find something or to find a topic. For example, space. I have I have felt this great pull inside of me whenever we talk about space or whenever I hear somebody talking about space science. And I want to know about it, despite myself not having a science background, but I'm beguiled by it. I'm attracted to it. Uh, and I'm its bunny. I'm undone by it. I just want to know more. I'm giddy in my, I just feel giddy. I want to know more about it. If I say I'm attracted to space science, every person will be able to craft that sentence. And if I say I'm intrigued by space science, it makes a world of difference. We are striving for that world of difference. Let's find more sentences. She was intrigued by her sister against her mother. I found story rather intriguing. She has an intriguing personality. Now, here in this third sentence, let's try and extrapolate that. Let's try and study this at length. She has an intriguing personality. If you come across a person whose style, morals, ethos, or a vibe, basically, even a vibe of a person, if you sense that there is an extra celestial element to somebody's personality, there's something which is intangible yet palpable, something that you can't transmit in words and terms, but you can feel, and it is exotic, then that person has an intriguing personality. And we don't use the word attractive. Anything that you're attracted to, just use the word intriguing. Can you think of a person in your vicinity, in your office, in your school, in your college, who has that it factor, who has that warmth, or who has that sass, which gets you thinking? That means that person has an attractive personality. And now I just made a mistake because I'm not supposed to espouse that word, to employ that word, to resort to that word. That word, under even extreme circumstances, will not be my final resort. I'll use the word intriguing. As I've said, I find space science or space exploration or topics related to that extremely intriguing. Let's look at more sentences. In the meantime, think of people who are who have that certain X factor, and you feel that pull inside of you towards them, and you have that illogical admiration of that person. You are enthralled by the effect of that person, and you use the word intriguing for that person, that that particular person has an intriguing personality. This intriguing book is both thoughtful and informative. It all sounds very intriguing. The magazine carries an intriguing mixture of high fashion, gossip, and racing. I hope you will love sentence.com and make progressive every day. This is a bit of a typo, it's not needed here. An intriguing item on the news pages caused me to raise an eyebrow over my morning coffee. Are you understanding? By the way, intriguing could be an alternative for interesting as well. Again, both are not on a literal prism or realm, not exactly interchangeable, but you can still do that and get away with it. There's a phrase called getting away with murder. So, English is such a versatile language that it allows for mishaps to occur to attain that glamour factor. You can play with English. You can't play with other languages as much as you can play with English. It allows for that freedom for one to flirt with the language, even at the expense of its grammar. So that is the beauty of English. Its flexibility, the freedom, is its most amusing aesthetic. Let's find more words which are common, please. Amazing. Again, we are not, none of us, nobody is a stranger to this word. I'm sure you hear this word at least 100 times in a week, if not in a day. Perhaps even more. For everything that intrigues people, for everything that encapsulates people, for everything that enthralls them, they've just got one word. Imagine, isn't it a matter of great prejudice, great bias? For all the feelings of astonishment, we have just one word, amazing. And how repetitive it has become. And again, everybody is using it. Where is that distinction? I demand for nothing but distinction from my speaker. Therefore, my dear, strive for distinction. Now, this one word behind my back should be eradicated. You'll have to impeach the very idea of this word. That's how commonplace it is. Now, we've identified this. Now, let's delve a bit deeper and find its alternatives. Spectacular. If you have watched cricket commentary, especially the Test cricket commentary, this is one word that commentators resort to evade the fear of sounding commonplace. That's why they resort to this word. Very rarely would you come across a commentator resorting to the word amazing. They'll use the word spectacular. Now, everything that amazes you, that you find wondersome, that enthralls you, that sends goosebumps or does something to you, you're moved by it, then you can use the word spectacular. Why to use the word amazing? Because we already know how common, how repetitive, how passe, how cliche, how frequent it has become. It should be redundant by now. Cut some slacks to it. And let's use spectacular. Everything that you see which has beauty in it, which has that wow factor, which captivates your attention, all your attention, in on an infinite scale, wherein you can't think of anything else but that. Spectacular. For example, there is a cricketer whom I feel is the greatest cricketer in the contemporary scenario, and could be perhaps the greatest, one of the greatest cricketers of all time. There's only one cricketer, in my opinion, in this generation who will go down as the greatest of all times, and that is Benjamin Stokes from England, better known as Ben Stokes. He is a spectacular cricketer. What he does on the ground is spectacular. The innings which he has played have that rigor, that vim, that pull that is rarely witnessed. So Ben Stokes is a spectacular cricketer. He brings something to the table which is extremely rare. Just how you need to become a spectacular orator. Your speeches have to be spectacular and not amazing. If you go to a cruise party, now cruise parties are different. They are exotic, they have that alien vibe. They are not like the parties that we do in discos or pubs. There's water there, turquoise water. Water has beauty of its own. The sound of water is such a melody. And then the party, the wilderness of the party, the tenderness of the party, the combination of the wilderness and the tenderness, the hard and the soft, and which creates for an eclectic vibe that is spectacular. Mountains. The city of Udaipur is a spectacular city because it is surrounded in such beautiful, daunting mountains, which are directed almost looking down at the city. Spectacular. When you talk about bike rides, Morocco is a spectacular place for riders. Every time you have the urge of using the word amazing, suppress that urge and alter it with spectacular. You'll have to learn to tie the bull by its horns. You'll have to learn to condition your brain to not use commonplace words. For instance, amazing. Let's have a look at these examples. You should see the film in 3D. It's spectacular. Of course, the view from the top is spectacular. Don't end up saying amazing when you are viewing something from the top. It is the first time the theater is hosting an ice spectacular. Meat prices are also to blame for his spectacular losses. Sometimes losses can also be spectacular. This is the quality of spectacular, which I forgot to tell, and thanks to this example, that it could be used for both positive and negative. For example, COVID-19. The tragedy of COVID-19 was spectacular. So this bilingual nature of this word makes it all the more interesting and all the more employable, isn't it? The camera will also give us spectacular pictures of both the race and huge crowds. Having created this brave new world, I expect spectacular things from the sequels. She lives in a beautiful large house in a spectacular setting. The party suffered a spectacular loss in the election. Again, it's used in a more this is used to embolden a negative plot. A loss reflects what? It reflects pessimism. Amazing is wondrous. The word has just one meaning and it could be used only for one feeling, which is full of optimism. With spectacular, as I've already stated, it has the property of it is bilingual. You could use it for both optimism and pessimism. And that makes it all the more wondersome, isn't it? Then why would we stick to one word that could only be used in one way? And why won't we find its alternatives that has properties doublefold? So spectacular is the way. The estate includes over 80 miles of paths through spectacular scenery. The flamboyant court of Burgundy was a spectacular expression of princely prestige and affluence. That's the way to go. Spectacular. And here we are at the end of it all. I surmise I was able to convey something of some importance within my own small means and little capacity. But I also believe that this is of utmost importance. As the world becomes more and more digital, more and more social media oriented, more and more overt, and honestly speaking, more and more ostentatious. The need for communication rises and rises in multitudes. Then don't you feel, why should you, me, or anybody that we happen to know of feel be left out? If it has become that important, that critical, then don't you think the responsibility is ours to find that game? There's a phrase, know the ropes. N-O-W-T-H-E, ropes, R-O-P-E-S. Knowing the ropes means when you understand the mechanism or the functions of a particular activity. Now is the time when you need to know the ropes of communication. Even if you have, with such toil, vigor, and hard work, accumulated technical expertise in the field, and for some unfortunate reasons, you weren't able to accumulate those expertise in regards to your communication, then you are in for a big, big trouble. But one thing that all of us have is time. One gift that all of us have is time, and there's always a second chance. So, considering we have this tempting combination or tantalizing combination of a second chance and time, then why let it go in vain? Why we cannot use this time and second chance in learning the ropes of communication? Let's give it a try. Let's up the ante and try and learn our game. You can scan these and access our social media platforms, be it Snapchat, Telegram, Instagram, WhatsApp, and get the entire catalog of the courses that we are offering. And whichever piques your interest, you may contact us. This is all what we have for now. This is our new channel. Please like the video, subscribe, and hit the like button so that you are updated every time we upload a new video. See you soon. Thank you.